Ilara Whitlock stood at the center of it all, her breath shallow, eyes wide behind the round glasses that slid slightly down her nose as the pages of the books around her fluttered violently, glowing faintly with ethereal light. Words dissolved and reformed mid-air, sentences twisting into riddles she had never seen before. The very fabric of the library's existence was unraveling, and Ilara felt the crushing weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. "It's happening faster than I expected," Mina's voice crackled through the comlink strapped to Ilara's ear. "The digital archives are spinning out of control. I'm seeing corrupted texts, scrambled codes. It's like the whole system is fighting back." In the dim glow of the ancient lamps, Ilara's gaze darted toward the far wall where stacks of books swayed unnaturally, their spines bending like living creatures. She tightened her grip on the cipher-laden tome she had been rewriting, the ink still wet and shimmering faintly with an otherworldly sheen. Each alteration she made seemed to ripple through the library itself, an unpredictable cause and effect that frightened and fascinated her in equal measure. "We have to stop it," Ilara whispered to herself, voice barely audible over the low hum of the library's unnatural transformation. If this chaos continues, the library's reality could collapse entirely. A sudden crash echoed from the western wing, where a towering bookshelf buckled under the strain of the shifting narrative. Dust motes danced in the swirling light as a cascade of books tumbled toward the floor. Ilara pivoted sharply, heart pounding, only to see librarian Marlowe step forward with an unflinching calm. His ivory mask caught the faint glow, reflecting a pale, ghostly light as he reached out to steady the collapsing shelf with surprising strength. "Marlowe," Ilara called out, her voice sharp with urgency. "We don't have much time. The rewriting is spiraling out of control." He inclined his head slightly, the expression behind the mask unreadable. "The library resists change, Miss Whitlock, but it is not impervious." Before she could respond, a new wave of distorted pages erupted from the shelves, swirling around them like a storm of fragmented stories. Ilara felt the words brush against her skin, each syllable a whisper from 1,000 voices past and future. The library was alive, a living narrative that both embraced and resisted her interference. From the shadows, Professor Alden Gray emerged, his gaunt frame framed against the undulating walls that seemed to ripple like liquid ink. His piercing blue eyes locked onto Ilara's, a mixture of warning and reluctant admiration simmering beneath his calm exterior. "You tread a dangerous path," he said gravely. "To rewrite fate is to invite chaos. But perhaps chaos is the only way to break the cycle." Ilara swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling deep within her. "I have to try," she replied. "If I don't, the last crime the cipher predicted, my own death, will come true." Gray nodded slowly, stepping closer. "Then we must face the unraveling together." Mina's voice crackled again, this time with a note of triumph. "I've found a way to stabilize some of the digital archives, but it's a temporary fix. We need to disrupt the source, the rewriting mechanism itself." Ilara nodded, determination hardening her features. "The hidden chamber, the artifacts, that's where the cult's power lies. If we can sever their control there, maybe we can anchor the narrative before it slips entirely through our fingers." As they moved through the convulsing halls, the library seemed to resist at every turn. Walls shifted imperceptibly, staircases led to corridors that vanished when approached, and whispers of forgotten stories echoed just beyond comprehension. Ilara's mind raced to piece together the cipher's final message, to find the words that could rewrite not just a prophecy, but the very nature of the library's existence. At one point, a sudden gust scattered a swarm of glowing pages around them, each fragment a twisted sentence or broken line. Ilara reached out, catching a page that shimmered with a phrase in delicate script. The narrative is unbound. The teller must choose. Her heart pounded. The choice was hers. In the chamber's shadowed heart, they confronted the ivory-masked symbols of the cult's enduring influence. The air thickened with the weight of centuries of control and obsession. Ilara's fingers trembled as she placed the rewritten cipher on the altar-like pedestal. The ink still alive with the glow of possibility. "This is it," she breathed. The final page. A pulse of energy rippled through the room, the rewriting books around them convulsing in a crescendo of chaotic light. The library teetered on the edge of collapse, stories and histories fracturing and converging in a dizzying dance. "Now," Ilara whispered, eyes fixed on the glowing text, "we break the cycle." As she began to read aloud the altered cipher, the walls around them quivered, the words in the books aligning in a fragile harmony. The narrative, once unbound and wild, started to coalesce, tethered by Ilara's will and the combined resolve of her allies. Yet, even as order returned, a lingering uncertainty hung in the air. The library had been changed forever, and so had she. The final question loomed. Could she truly control a story so vast and ancient? Or had she only delayed the inevitable unraveling? The answer was unwritten. But Ilara Whitlock was no longer bound to be a mere character in the tale. She was the author of her fate, wielding the pen with trembling hands and a resolute heart. And the last page had yet to be written. Its edges were worn, the stitching frayed, but the embossed initial ZW gleamed faintly beneath the dim glow of her flashlight. Her fingers trembled slightly as she traced the faded letters, a sudden, unspoken connection binding her to the past she had so long sought to understand. Each page whispered secrets in the soft crackle of brittle parchment. The handwriting, elegant yet hurried, belonged unmistakably to her mother. As Ilara read, the dense silence of the room was punctuated only by the distant rustle of shifting books and the occasional drip of water from the ancient stone walls. Her mother's words unfolded a tapestry of hidden truths. The ivory cult was not merely an external menace, but a shadow entwined with her very bloodline. The diary recounted clandestine meetings beneath the vaulted arches of the university, where her parent scholars and secret resistors had gathered to challenge the cult's deterministic grip on history. They spoke of narrative control as both weapon and prison, their voices hushed with the weight of forbidden knowledge. Ilara's heart pounded as she absorbed the sacrifices made to protect her, including the painful choice that led to their disappearance. In the quiet study room that evening, Ilara read aloud passages that revealed the cult's origins entwined with myth and scholarly obsession. Her voice wavered with reverence, the shadows of her parents' fight casting long echoes across the walls. Professor Alden Gray, seated nearby, listened with an inscrutable expression, his piercing blue eyes reflecting both sorrow and a cautious hope. They were more than victims, Ilara whispered. They were part of the resistance, trying to rewrite the story before it could be sealed. Professor Gray nodded slowly. Their courage is why you are here now. But the fight is far from over. Memories flooded back vivid flashes of her childhood, the veiled warnings, the subtle tension in her relative's eyes. The ivory mask that once sat on her father's desk now seemed a symbol of both menace and protection. As the rain pattered against the stained glass windows, Ilara felt the turbulent mix of grief and determination swell within her. She rose, moving to the window, watching the storm ripple across the campus. The past, with all its shadows and secrets, had finally become a beacon. Her parents' legacy was no longer a burden but a call to arms, To break the cycle, to reclaim the narrative, she must embrace the full weight of her heritage. The library around her seemed to pulse with renewed life, the rewriting texts momentarily still as if awaiting her next move. Ilara's gaze hardened with resolve. The final chapter was yet to be written, and she would be its author. As the storm raged inside the library, a fragile hope took root, one that would either shatter the cult's hold forever or consume her in the unforgiving tide of fate. With a deep breath, Ilara closed the diary and turned toward the labyrinthine shelves, ready to face whatever shadows lurked ahead. The echoes of the past had spoken. Now it was time to shape the future. As Ilara Whitlock stood in the heart of the ancient building, she was surrounded by the trembling skeleton of knowledge itself. Shelves groaned under the weight of centuries, their foundations quivering. Dust motes swirling in the faint shafts of waning sunlight that filtered through stained glass windows, clouded by neglect. The very air seemed charged, thick with the echo of countless rewritten stories desperate to be heard. Ilara's breath caught, a sharp intake that echoed against the stone walls. Around her, the book's whispered pages fluttering like wounded birds, their inked voices fragmented and desperate. She could feel the pulse of the library, the slow unraveling of its carefully woven narrative fabric, stretched thin by the defiance she and her allies had wrought. "It's happening faster than I feared," Mina Solis murmured, her voice low, steady but trembling with suppressed fear. She crouched beside Ilara, one arm steadying her friend while the other clutched a battered notebook filled with hastily scribbled cipher notes. Mina's curly auburn hair caught the waning light, shimmering like embers against the shadowed backdrop of the restricted archives. Ilara forced herself to stand upright, pushing back the wave of exhaustion and pain that radiated from a fresh bruise along her. Ribs a souvenir from their last confrontation with the Ivory cult's enforcers. "We broke the cycle," she whispered, a bittersweet note threading through her voice. "But at what cost?" The walls shuddered again, a deeper, more insistent tremor that sent a cascade of dust into the air. Somewhere in the distance, the anguished creak of a collapsing bookshelf echoed like a death knell. Professor Alden Gray appeared silently, as if summoned by the chaos. His tall, gaunt frame seemed almost ethereal amidst the swirling debris, his silver hair disheveled, eyes sunken but burning with a somber light. Without preamble, he reached out and touched a crumbling manuscript resting on a nearby pedestal. The brittle pages fluttered uncontrollably, their inked words distorting and dispersing like smoke. "The price," he said quietly, voice grave, "was always going to be high. The library does not forgive those who seek to alter its course without sacrifice." Ilara listened, a knot tightening in her chest. "What do you mean? What sacrifice?" Gray's gaze settled on her, a mixture of regret and resolve etched into the lines of his face. The curse of the Ivory cult was not just control over fate, it was a tether binding the library's essence to a deterministic narrative. Breaking free fractures that tether, some will be lost to the unraveling. Some parts of history, and ourselves, will be erased or altered beyond recall. Mina's grip tightened on Ilara's arm. "Are you saying we might lose each other? Or worse," Gray whispered, "lose pieces of our very selves?" A sudden, cold presence filled the room. Librarian Marlowe emerged from the shadows, his ivory mask held loosely in one hand, his face pale and unreadable beneath the dim light. His eyes, dark and fathomless, locked onto Alaris with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. "You have set in motion events that cannot be undone," he intoned, voice low and resonant. "The library's reality is no longer stable. The rules have changed. Freedom is not without consequence. Alara swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling like lead in her stomach. What does that mean for us, for the future? Marlowe's lips curved into a faint, enigmatic smile. It means the story is yours to write, but the pen may cut deeper than you expect. The room seemed to pulse with an unseen energy, the very air crackling with tension as books fell silent, their restless pages finally stilled. Alara felt the fragile hope flickering within her promise that the future was unwritten, yet tempered by the grim reality that the cost of freedom was steep and uncertain. She turned to Mina and Gray, their faces reflecting the same mix of fear and determination. "We cannot turn back," Alara said firmly, voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "We fight or not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Because the price of freedom, however high, is worth paying." As the library trembled around them, Alara understood that their battle had only just begun. The fabric of reality was frayed, and the path ahead was shadowed and treacherous. But within the chaos, there was a spark of fragile hope that the stories of tomorrow could be their own. And with that thought, Alara stepped forward into the uncertain dawn, ready to face whatever cost awaited them. The air was thick with dust and the scent of old parchment as Alara and her allies moved cautiously through the deepest sections of the library. The walls seemed to breathe, their stone surfaces subtly shifting in the dim light. Every step echoed like a heartbeat, a reminder of the fragile balance they had disturbed. Mina's voice broke the silence, whispering urgently, "The cipher's broken the pattern, but the library fights back. Every page we read, every secret we uncover, it's like the building is trying to rewrite us out." Alara nodded, her gaze fixed on a shattered tome lying open on the floor. The words on its pages were fragmented, letters fading and reappearing as if the book itself was struggling to hold on to its story. "We've already lost so much," Ela murmured. "Memories, people, pieces of ourselves. But this is the only way." Professor Gray's voice was a steady anchor amid the chaos. The Ivory cult believed that history was immutable, that fate was sealed in ink. But you've proven otherwise. The library's reality is a living narrative, and you've begun to rewrite it. Suddenly, a distant crash shook the floor beneath their feet. The sound of a collapsing bookshelf sent a shockwave of panic through the group. Alara's heart raced as she helped Mina steady herself. "We need to keep moving," Gray urged. "The longer the instability continues, the more unpredictable the consequences will be." Their path led them toward the heart of the library, where ancient mechanisms once used to control the rewriting books lay hidden beneath layers of dust and secrecy. Alara's fingers trembled as she traced the intricate engravings on a brass panel, feeling the weight of history and the burden of change. "Is this the source?" Mina asked, eyes wide. "Possibly," Alara replied. "If we can understand how this works, maybe we can stabilize the library or at least protect what remains of our reality." As they worked, the library's whispers grew louder, a cacophony of fragmented stories and half-remembered truths swirling around them. Alara felt a cold presence behind her and turned sharply to see librarian Marlowe watching silently, his expression unreadable. "You tamper with forces beyond your comprehension," he warned. "The library demands balance. For every action, there is a price." Alara met his gaze defiantly. "We accept that price, because living under your control is the greater cost." Marlowe's lips twitched into a ghost of a smile before he vanished into the shadows, leaving Alara and her allies alone amid the crumbling sanctum of knowledge. Hours passed like minutes as they toiled to decipher the mechanisms and reconfigure the ancient scripts. Exhaustion gnawed at their resolve, but the vision of a future free from the cult's grasp propelled them onward. When the final sequence was set, Alara hesitated, feeling the weight of 1,000 unwritten stories pressing upon her. With a deep breath, she triggered the mechanism. A surge of energy rippled through the library. The walls shuddered violently, and the dust rose in towering spirals. Books flew open, their pages flipping wildly as if caught in a storm of words. The air crackled with raw power, the very narrative of the library bending and breaking. Alara clung to Mina's hand, heart pounding as the ground shifted beneath them. When the chaos finally subsided, the silence that followed was profound, an unspoken acknowledgement of what had been lost and what had been gained. In the aftermath, Alara knew that the library would never be the same. Some stories were lost forever, some memories faded like ink in rain. But the cage was broken, and the future was, at last, theirs too, right? Yet, as she gazed into the uncertain horizon, a shadow of doubt lingered. The Ivory cult's legacy was not so easily erased, and the true price of freedom had yet to be fully revealed. Alara tightened her grip on her notebook, determination blazing anew. This is only the beginning, she vowed. And whatever comes next, we face it together. The library held its breath, and so did she. Alara Whitlock sat at the ancient oak table, her fingers lightly tracing the smooth surface as if grounding herself to the present. Around her, the books lay still, their pages no longer fluttering or shifting under unseen hands. The rewriting had ceased. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the narratives held steady, their stories fixed in place. She exhaled slowly, the breath trembling with a complex mixture of relief and lingering tension. The weight of what they had endured pressed upon her chest, the relentless chase through cryptic ciphers, the shadow of the Ivory cult hovering just beyond reach, the dizzying distortion of time and story. Yet now, in this fragile stillness, a seed of hope took root. The faint rustle of footsteps broke the quiet. Mina Solis appeared in the doorway, a small stack of recovered manuscripts clutched carefully in her arms. Her auburn curls caught the low light as she approached, eyes bright and eager despite the exhaustion etched into her youthful face. Alara, Mina said softly, setting the papers down with a reverence that mirrored her friend's own. Look what I found tucked away in the restricted archives. Some of the original texts before the rewriting began. Alara leaned forward, her glasses catching the lamplight as she scanned the fragile pages. Each word was a testament to stories unaltered by dark designs, a glimpse of truth preserved against time's erosion. This could be the key to rebuilding what was lost. She murmured, her voice steady yet filled with wonder. Mina smiled, a spark of courage rekindled. We're not just survivors, Alara. We're the authors now. As they spoke, a tall figure emerged from the shadowed stacks, Professor Alden Gray. His silver hair shimmered faintly, his piercing blue eyes fixed with a steadiness that had grown rare in recent weeks. He approached the table with a measured gait, the weight of his own secrets evident but tempered by a newfound calm. You've done well, he said quietly, his voice carrying the gravitas of years spent guarding the library's mysteries. The cessation of the rewriting is no small victory. Alara met his gaze, searching for the mentor she once trusted, and found a man both wiser and wearier. Is it truly over? She asked, the question heavy with uncertainty. Gray's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. The cycle is broken, but the story continues. Control has loosened, but the future remains unwritten. The grand clock above them told midnight, its deep chimes reverberating through the cavernous halls. Alara's eyes drifted upward, watching the hands move inexorably forward, a tangible reminder that time marched on, indifferent to their struggles. She thought of the countless pages that had predicted her demise, the cryptic messages that had bound her fate so tightly. Yet here she sat, alive and resolute, poised on the threshold of a new chapter. "We have a fragile hope," Ilara said, voice firm, "and that is enough to keep fighting." Mina reached out, squeezing her hand. "Together." Professor Gray nodded, his expression a mixture of pride and caution. "Together, you may yet rewrite the narrative of your lives." Outside, the first hints of dawn began to pale the sky. A silent promise that even after the darkest night, the story moves forward. Ilara looked toward the horizon, her heart a battleground of dread and unwavering hope. The ivory masks had fallen away, but the shadows they cast lingered still. She would face them, page by page, word by word, shaping a future no longer dictated by ancient cults or predestined fate. The power of stories was vast, dangerous, yes, but also liberating. And in that power, Ilara found her fragile hope. As the library breathed in the quiet aftermath, so too did Ilara, ready to write the next lines of her own story, uncertain but undeterred. The last page was not yet written.